Audeze makes a lot of headphones. They currently sell 12 versions of their over-ear LCD series headphones. Last month, they released their cheapest offering, the LCD-1. Audeze's price bracket now contains headphones costing $400 to $4,000. But before the LCD-1, there was the LCD-2, the darling of the audiophile community. The LCD-2 has gone through many revisions. The very first set of LCD-2 headphones were good first efforts that had driver problems. Some of the complaints involved drivers that randomly failed, weird resonances in the sound signature, and overall build issues. Indeed, the original LCD-2 headphones had wood ear cups that had a tendency to crack due to moisture. Audeze made some adjustments. They implemented a piece of thick metal where the mini XLR jacks fit into the ear cups. Presumably, this is the spot that would get the most wear and tear as people plugged in the headphones and put them down on a surface. This is also the best way to tell the difference between the Fazor and non-Fazor versions. Audeze also tweaked the drivers, adding some physical modifications as well as tuning adjustments. The physical modification is what they call phasors. Audeze describes these things as little airplane wings that help redirect the air being pushed by the drivers. The idea is that the implementation of these phasors will help provide cleaner upper mids and treble frequencies. Consequently, the details in those spectrums will be easier to hear, theoretically. Audeze purposefully does not provide frequency response charts for his headphones. A quick Google search will reveal many FR graphs compiled by fans. I have heard a number of people say that the universally credible person who conducts such FR measurements is named Oratory1990, who is on Reddit. Luckily, Oratory uploaded FR graphs for the LCD-2 Fazor. He also uploaded graphs for the pre-Fazor LCD-2. When you look at these two graphs, you can see there is a lot of similarity. However, when you also take a closer look at the treble region in the LCD-2 Fazor graphs, you can see that there is a measured difference. The treble frequency is not as dipped as it is measured in the pre-Fazor version. All these measurements are nice, but they're no substitute for actually listening. In my opinion, the LCD-2 Fazor is fairly smooth sounding. The bass response is pretty deep, reconstructing some deep sub-bass rumble. That rumble is not distorted or harsh. The transients of that rumble is very fast, as is the rest of the bass frequency. The bass is not impactful, however. If you like the chest-thumping sound of music at a block party, you will be disappointed. If you're a bass head, these are not the headphones you are looking for. The bass does sound a little muddy, however. This is a difference from distortion in my opinion. Muddy bass occurs when the sub-bass and mid-bass do not have sufficient separation. Distortion occurs when the bass interacts with other frequencies like the mids and causes unnatural resonances. Think of this as the difference between speaking normally and speaking into a running fan. The mids sound clear. There is no harshness or sibilance. That can be a negative for some people. Some singers have natural sibilance that gets blunted. For example, in Orla Gartland's Why Am I Like This, the LCD-2 takes away some sibilance in her voice, sibilance that helps set her apart from the mix. The LCD-2's rendition of her voice takes her otherwise airy, sibilant, grainy voice and smooths it out. The LCD-2 also pulls her voice back in the mix so that it is no more than one step ahead of the mix on the soundstage. The LCD-2 has a weird rendition of treble. Some instruments have very pinpoint, almost harsh treble response, whereas others have a blunted response. In Scherzo for X-Wings, there are multiple treble instruments. Horns, brass are the ones that typically stand out. The LCD-2 blunts the horns and accentuates the brass, or at least the brass sounds more energetic than the horns. This makes the horns less audible in the mix when the brass instruments are also playing. The brass simply overpowers the horns. This is not to the extent that you cannot hear the horns, rather that the brass is simply overbearing. Some people claim that the LCD-2 has large soundstage that is wide and tall. I find this to be inaccurate. The LCD-2 has average soundstage. It is like listening to decent bookshelf speakers in your living room. There's nothing unique about the LCD-2 soundstage. Indeed, I have heard dynamic driver headphones that either have similar or wider soundstage. Indeed, when listening to orchestral songs, the LCD-2 does not provide a whole lot of information about the placement of instruments. You can hear certain instruments in one ear cup or another, but there is no separation beyond that. In a typical orchestra, the instruments are placed directly in front of the director, often in a semicircle. Instruments are placed purposefully. The big, bassy instruments usually go to the back, and the strings closer to the front, and cymbals somewhere out in the wings. When listening to the LCD-2, I cannot find this type of placement. I cannot say that I hear the brass instruments to the right ear cup but a little further back, or that the cymbal is directly to my left and sounds close. Instead, the LCD-2 presents a fairly plain Jane stereo sound, left and right. This is true with every genre: hip-hop, orchestra, pop, acoustic, ambient, you name it. Consequently, the LCD-2 does not have any 3D effect, that is, the ability to present sound from above or behind you. The sound is very much directed straight into your ear. The LCD-2 also does not provide much micro-detail retrieval. In songs like New Light, some of the elements of the song are indeed missing. The sound of kids playing in the background is very muted, sounding muffled more than distant. The sound of walking on dried grass is barely noticeable other than the first 3 steps, which has been apparent in every headphone that I have tested. After the first 3 steps, I struggled to hear the rest of the footsteps throughout the song. In the song Flight from the City, the pianist moves on his bench, causing it to creak. That sound should be audible. It should be sharp creaking like walking on loose floorboards. The LCD-2 presents a muffled sound instead. It is still audible, but not nearly as obvious as I've heard it in many other headphones, even in headphones costing a fraction of the price of the LCD-2. The LCD-2 is meant to enjoy music, not to listen critically. In that respect, it does its job admirably. The Audeze sound signature with the LCD-2 is fairly smooth. It is not like the ZMF Icon, which is the smoothest, most relaxing sounding headphone I have ever heard. The LCD-2 has more grain in the sound signature than the Icon, a bit more harshness in the mids than the Icon. As for the build quality, I think it is rather robust. I like the Audeze appearance. There are only 2 obvious plastic bits to this headphone on the yoke. It weighs quite a bit in the hand, but the weight is easily distributed on my head, even with the original headband. Audeze now includes an upgraded headband for better comfort. The LCD-2 has a 70 ohm impedance. That is not significant, but it sure sounds like a much higher impedance headphone. The LCD-2 could not be driven by the AudioQuest Cobalt or by the onboard sound card on my laptop. I had to switch to the X-Duo XD05 at high gain and turn the volume knob to about 50% to drive these headphones. On the Monolith THX AAA desktop amplifier, the volume has to be set at around -30 decibel for normal listening volume. The LCD-2 remains a very unique experience. It is not as smooth as the previous pre-Fazor LCD-2. It is not as detailed as the more pricey LCD headphones like the X or XC, but it retains the Audeze house sound, which may be to your liking. I conduct thorough reviews of products on my channel. You can expect that the LCD-2 Fazor will be tested and compared. At $1,000, the LCD-2 isn't cheap by any standard of measurement. There are alternative headphones, both dynamic and planar drivers, that may deliver a similar sound for a fraction of the cost. If that is the case, we'll try to find the answer.